Well, I was just talking with a local, and I'm still here at the big ice rafted Erratic. One of the things he told me is that I'm pronouncing the name of the valley wrong. Mind you, I know the correct pronunciation of the state because having lived in Toledo, Ohio, there's a little town on the east side of Toledo spelled exactly the same way as a state. And almost everybody pronounces it Oregon. But when I had an aunt and uncle move into there, they told me the correct pronunciation is also the correct pronunciation you get from anyone who lives in this state. It's Oregon. It's not Oregon, it's Oregon. But anyway, the valley is the Willamette Valley, and I'm right near the confluence of the Willamette River and the Yamhill River, I think it was called, and I'm missing that name again. I'll have to get that and correct that name. But that gives it a real nice view because you got two rivers coming together here to give you a really nice view here. Right above them, you got this ice rafted Erratic here, and just such a monster it is. And then you got other pieces of it that may have been separated by the glacier originally and were still in the iceberg as it came to rest. And you know, even if I walk out here toward this fence, sorry it's a little rough out here, but you walk around, you see what looks like some gopher hills, but then you see another one of these pieces of an Erratic. And you didn't necessarily see this little piece over here. Little being a relative term, it's not a rock anybody's going to pick up by hand, but it kind of hides in the grass a little bit compared to that little bit bigger one over there. But yeah, this one's probably about 3 foot by 4 foot. Excuse me. And you see the one in the grass over there, and the big main one there, that's about 90 tons out of the original 160 tons before people collected souvenirs off it and walked it away. I can see there's another one over there, it looks like, kind of buried in the dirt. More signs of gophers in the area. Yeah, I just kind of see the top edge of it here as it's getting pretty buried into the dirt here. Maybe two separate ones, or maybe two pieces of the same one. And you got another one up here. You can see just pretty much buried in the dirt. Maybe part of that one, or that's a separate one. Kind of hard to tell. You know, unless you dug them up, and that digging them up would be a bad thing to do because it would disrupt the whole process. I suppose using echolocation or something, you might be able to sound out the location of them and see how big they are and such. But looking in the sun, not into the sun right now, so that's probably not the best view of this rock. But it is a pretty awesome rock. In the town of McMinnville, in the Willamette Valley, in the state of Oregon. Let's do our best to pronounce it the way they like to pronounce it. And then you get to see some pretty little wildflowers here. I gotta say that either it's coming up around the stalks of the Queen Anne's lace, and all I can see is leaves of Queen Anne's lace, or it's a similar plant, because I'm not seeing any separate leaves that tell me. No, definitely it's got the little feathery leaves similar to the Queen Anne's lace, but at the same time it's not the same plant. So whether that's in the carrot family as well or what it is, I'm not sure. But get around here and get the sun away from the front of the camera, and still get a really good look at just this enormous rock that's up on top of this hill. And the only way to explain a glacial erratic where there's no glacier on top of a hill is it had to get rafted in on an iceberg, and that means you had to have a catastrophic flood, because we're like 35 miles roughly from Portland, and the Columbia River is on the north side of Portland. The Willamette River flows into the Columbia, but to get to it, you've got to go all the way down there. So that tells you just what kind of a flood you had to bring a rock this big in on a iceberg big enough to float it, that it would come to rest on this hillside in this valley that would have been completely filled with water by a flood. That is one amazing story. And if it wasn't for the fact that you can scientifically prove that it pretty much makes sense that that happened, and it's the only way it could have happened, you'd still be scratching your head today and going, how did this rock get here when it didn't come from this valley? There's no metamorphic rocks like it anywhere here. We don't know how it got here. I mean, if you look down the path where I came from, and you look at those trucks down in the valley, I mean, they look like toys. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if those trucks are a good half a mile from me. Out in the distance where I see the road going, we're talking a couple miles out there, and all that would be underwater. Almost everything you can see other than the hill, some hilltops and a mountain range out there, would all be underwater. Even this hill I'm standing on would have been underwater, because the iceberg that would have held this would have been big enough that you probably wouldn't be seeing any land here. Maybe up where that gate is would have been above the water, because that would probably make a good water level for the iceberg to kind of get stuck here. But you got to remember, it had to be a really big iceberg to carry in 160 tons of rock. And there's no real way to know what shape it was either. But it was big. That's one thing you can say about it. It was big. What an amazing story. A glacial erratic, rafted in by a glacial flood that started by a dam of ice that collapsed hundreds of miles away. That all that water came down the Columbia River, and it came down so fast and couldn't get to the ocean fast enough that it just diverted itself out into this plain or valley here in Oregon and filled it up. What an amazing story. Well, it's time to go see what else is out there.